Hello and good day. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from Livestream and eTurbo News in Honolulu. And with me, as always, is Peter Tarlow, Dr. Peter Tarlow, in College Station, Texas. And today we're going to be focusing a little bit on the aviation industry and also on the recent incident on a Boeing 777 flying on a United Airlines flight from Denver to Honolulu. We're going to hear a little bit about how it happened, why it happened, and have a conversation about this. But before we get there, Peter, how are you today?
I'm doing great. You didn't ask me about the weather, but the weather's a little rainy today, but cool and rainy, but it's in the 50s, but at least it's not freezing. So we can live with 50 degrees. Uh, Lots is still going on in the world of tourism. Of course, I'm really happy that we're going to be talking in much more detail about the aviation industry. But there are other issues that also are going on right now. We're starting to see, in a sense, aviation touches all of them because we're starting to see the issue of coming on of we're seeing the issue coming on of the meetings industry starting to expand. For example, Las Vegas for a long time only allowed 50 people at a meeting. Now they're allowing up to 200. And so that's kind of an interesting concept that will be meaning that more people are going to have to fly. And so again, aviation is important. The other thing is the Japanese are still grappling with the issue of the Olympics in Tokyo. Right now, it appears that the Olympics will go on, but they might not have any spectators. It might be a spectatorless Olympics. But of course, part of that deals with the whole issue of COVID. And as you know, different places are either becoming stricter or less strict. So some states in the United States are in the process of not having mask laws anymore. And there are other places that are becoming stricter when it comes to this type of issue. So you're really seeing a bifurcation on how people are starting to see the world. And should we have more lockdowns, less lockdowns? Some people say Dr. Fauci doesn't want to end the lockdowns to 2037. I think that's probably an exaggeration, as we're only in 2021 right now. But I think that joke kind of implements the idea that we're seeing a divided, not just the United States, but a divided world where different people are saying, all right, enough already. They have COVID fatigue. And other people are saying, no, hold on. This is really important. Let's go to the very end. We got to keep everything just where it is. So between aviation and COVID, I think we got two big issues going on right now in the world of tourism.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you look at uh, the numbers right now, we did a story last night on how dangerous COVID really is. There are many numbers you have to really compare. Overall, within the last year, since we're dealing with COVID, are really the numbers of people that died. And this has to be put in relations of the population, of course. If you have one person dying in Gibraltar, it's definitely different than one person dying in the United States because we got so
China.
many more people. And then, of course, you compare the number of cases also in relation of population in in numbers. And probably if you find countries listed in that are very big in numbers of COVID, but they're not listed in the 10 deadliest uh, list, then you see who is maybe more advanced when it comes to how to fight this virus and how to at least keep people alive. And so just to give everyone an idea, the first 10 countries of the most deadliest countries right now in the world, and you find a lot of smaller countries here, and this probably makes a lot of sense. It's Gibraltar, it's San Marino, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, the United Kingdom, Italy, Portugal, Montenegro, and then the US is number 10. But when it comes to the most infected countries, not the deadliest, you have number 1 Andorra, 2 Gibraltar, 3 is Montenegro, 4 Czech Republic, San Marino, Slovenia. The United States is number 7, Luxembourg number 8, Israel number 9, and Portugal number 10. There are a lot of statistics. We know it's not a joking matter, and we have to just keep on going. And hopefully, with now another vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson out there, we'll be able to get this virus a little bit better under control and hopefully a lot faster.
And again, I want to really encourage everyone. I last night was listening to Admiral Brett Giroir speak about the COVID vaccines, and I was listening to Dr. Fauci, and both say the exact same thing. Take a vaccine. It really, don't wait for one over the other. They're all good. They've all been well tested. The issue is not preference of, it's not like brand. I like blue versus green. I'm going to wait till I get a blue sweater versus a green sweater. In this case, they all go inside of you. They all help. They'll all help to really defeat this virus. I do think it's kind of interesting. The England and as pointed itself as, I think you said, one of the 10 deadliest countries, and they're a big country, and they are one of the more vaccinated countries. On the other hand, we're seeing a lot of countries in Africa and the Middle East that have had very poor vaccination rates, and they're not appearing on these lists. So that may be an anomaly or something that we have to really begin to understand. Yemen, now, of course, part of this is who's reporting. Yes. So it's not just the numbers you have, because if I don't report the numbers, then I don't, I'm hiding. So, but for example, a place like Yemen is reporting almost no COVID and has no health system. Now, it could be because either COVID didn't get there because or they're having too many people die in the war in Yemen, and so they don't have a chance to develop COVID, or they're not reporting the numbers. We just don't know that. But I think whenever we look at these numbers statistically, you are right. You have to look 1 per 100,000. You don't want to look at it as raw numbers, because obviously Belgium is a lot smaller than China. So you would expect, but it's the percentage within total population. But then the other part is who's reporting, who's telling the truth, who's hiding, and that's another big problem. In the United States, we know that hospitals get paid more if you have a COVID death or COVID illness than if you have a flu illness. So hospitals have a tendency to report more COVID. So there's a numbers game that's taking place around the world. Belgium is arguing the same problem, that Belgium classifies almost everything as COVID versus other countries that kind of play it down. So that's a real threat, because we don't really have good data.
Yeah, and there are some countries, so we did the story also yesterday, Tanzania is a good example, where it's actually against the law in Tanzania to report these cases. And just as of Friday last week, they now actually admitted, yeah, we have some corona issues. And before that, a doctor was not even allowed to treat anyone for corona. The doctor was allowed to treat someone because a person cannot breathe, but he could never mention corona. So the world is upside down, and different laws and different ways of handling this. And I found it a little bit, I have to say, almost disturbing when I read through our discussion at the African Tourism Board this morning. And some people in Tanzania really not only deny COVID, but said it's brought by the West, so we can sell our medicine to Tanzania, and Tanzania should not buy these medicines. Everything they should buy should be made in Tanzania. So you see, there is so much confusion going on, and one rumor goes on top of another rumor, and at the end, people die.
Yes, but Jürgen, you're really pointing out a very important issue. It's not just in COVID. This is an issue throughout all of tourism security. When I have to compare security analyses of safety or non-safety from one country to another, there's no standardization. There's no standardization of how one police department reports or another police department reports. What is considered to be a felony and what is not considered to be a felony. What is a sexual assault and what is not a sexual assault. So that when you're looking from across borders, you really are comparing apples and oranges. And that makes it really difficult to develop a standardization where we can kind of create both international safety and international health, both of which really need, one, clear definitions, and two, clear systems of reporting. And I think we are seeing one exception to that, which may be in the world of aviation. And I know we're going to be talking now about aviation and the importance that the aviation industry does in being transparent and not hiding the information, but making sure that everybody in the, we might call it the fraternity of aviation, knows exactly what's going on. So that's a bright star in somewhat of a dark sky.
So that she doesn't get hit by something. Are these?
I saw the plane engines sputter, and then I saw things fly out the back.
Well, I think oh my god!
Like
Woo.
something, like some. Oh my gosh!
Hey.
Oh yeah, there's more things.
Yeah, Che, why don't we get going? Because these things are just falling.
Everybody's leaving.
It's just dropping pieces.
Holy.
Yeah, I think we should go.
Yeah, let's go. Where's Josie? Holy shit. I know, grab the dog. I don't know what it is.
Yay!
Thank you very much again for joining Livestream.travel and eTurbo News. We're now going to be going to Maryland, and we're talking to Mark Iyer. He's with the Aviation Manual Group, I believe. He can probably explain it a little bit more. And the reason we're reaching out to Mark's company sent us a press release in regards to the situation with the Boeing 777 incident on the flight from Denver to Honolulu. We reported about it, where debris from the engine were scattered over a city in Colorado. What of course shouldn't happen on a flight to Hawaii. We don't want people to go this type of adventure when they come to our state here. But in any ways, Mark, welcome. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you're doing and so forth.
Well, thanks for having me, Jürgen. I very much appreciate it. So essentially, Aviation Manuals has been around for close to 30 years now. And we provide support for operators that often don't have the size or scale to keep up with standards, policies, procedures, regulations, as well as safety management system processes within their operation. So often it's business aviation, regional airlines, some military squadrons, commercial drone operators, to keep them and help them stay on top of their safety standards and regulations.
Mark, I really think that's super important right now, especially in the tourism world. People are a little bit afraid to travel just because of COVID. Mm-hmm. Now we added it to it, the fear that we're just getting over on the 737. Should people be scared, or is this just an anomaly in a normally very safe paradigm?
I think it is an anomaly. I think still, if you look at the statistics and the data, travel by air is really dramatically safer. And I think you know, by an order of multiples of lightning strikes, for instance, you're four times more likely to get struck by lightning than die in an aircraft accident. One of the stats that I find is interesting that I read. So if you take the average passenger load of say 90 passengers or 100 passengers, you would literally have to have one aircraft crash almost every day to be equal to the number of people that die every year on the roads in North America. So the numbers are staggeringly low given how much flying is happening. So it's quite level. It's not increasing. In fact, over the long term, accidents and incidents are decreasing. It's really one of the most regulated, one of the most analyzed, and one of the industries with the highest policies and procedures. So it's incredibly safe and really only getting safer.
Nope, I think that's good for everybody to hear. What should we be looking out for? What should be what we, or just get on a plane, just don't worry?
I think not to worry. I think in this, if you take the 777 incident, ironically enough, and as frightening as it may sound, that actually everything functioned really very much the way it was supposed to. So the aircraft kept flying. Jürgen, you mentioned, you mentioned Hawaii. that aircraft's actually designed for extended overwater operations. So, it can fly on one engine, as it did very effectively. I think the biggest danger in this particular incident was unfortunately to people on the ground, for debris falling. So the explosion was actually even considered a contained explosion, so that the parts really didn't fly out of the engine. What happened is due to vibrations, and I think due to two things that we look at is the cowling piece that came out of the front was off of the front, probably shouldn't happen. And they did throttle back and actually use two of the igniters inside the engine, but the fire nevertheless didn't go out. So those were really the two things that we're going to have to learn the most about. But the aircraft kept flying. The pilots did exactly what they were meant to do. Airspace was cleared out for them. And on top of it, I found the ground, the ground operations was really effective because they were out collecting parts of that aircraft for analysis really incredibly quickly. So this was a textbook success in many ways, unfortunately, even given that it was an unpleasant success.
A success is still a failure.
Exactly. So I think what they're going to do is have enhanced inspections on these engines, which they've already put out some airworthiness directives to do that. They inspect, essentially it was metal fatigue. We've known about it since the Industrial Revolution. You act upon metal, with vibrations, with forces for that excessively, that metal will give at a certain point. And one of the blades sheared and broke off a second blade. And really that's what set off this chain reaction. So what they're asking now to do is to analyze, essentially to get the inside of the blades. It's basically called a thermal acoustic inspection equipment. So they run that inspection through the actual material and basically can see almost on an atomic level whether there's any further stress or fractures. So
now, when we look back, we had a number of incidents, not necessarily with the 777, but with the 73 MAX, and what actually resulted in crashes and in many people dying. And so Boeing definitely had its shares of unexpected problems. So when this goes on top of it, and I think the FAA actually recommended, or I don't know, took these many of these aircrafts with a specific engine out of service. Is this still ongoing, or are they back in service, or do you know what the situation
I
is?
think it's still ongoing. I mean, a good number of them, because of COVID, were actually grounded, believe it or not. So there weren't the full fleet of these Pratt & Whitney engined aircraft is actually not even in operation. I think there were 120 or 128 that were built or that were fitted with these engines. And it's a little unfair to Boeing in this particular instance because they've been in the news so much recently that of course everybody grabbed on to Boeing, but really this is an engine issue, and the engine manufacturer is Pratt & Whitney, which frankly, has nothing to do with the airframe manufacturer. There are many times the engines are actually requested by the operators, not actually by the manufacturer of the aircraft. They're requested by the airlines. So in this particular instance, it really is a Pratt & Whitney engine. That's actually on numerous aircraft, different versions of it, and very different than I think happened with the 737 MAX. I do think the authorities worked very effectively this time. They wasted no time in grounding the fleet and requesting enhanced inspections. As far as I understand it, those inspections are still ongoing, so not all the aircraft are going to be released anytime soon here, I think, back into service. So.
Before you go on, I think you mentioned something that maybe a lot of people don't understand or have never heard of, and that is most of us assume that when you get on a Boeing flight, the plane, everything is made by Boeing, the engine, the toilets, you name it, it's all Boeing. And you now indicated, no, that actually Boeing is making the frame, but
Correct.
The engines are from different companies. So how many companies, so when I get on a 777, do I know which company made which engine, or is it just, or are there differences between these engines? Why does one airline pick one company, another airline pick another company?
Some of it is national, some of it is performance, some of it is experience. It could have to do with the network that they have. So if they've already have a lot of aircraft that are outfitted with Pratt & Whitney engines, it might be easier for them to service or support the Pratt & Whitney engines. Another airline might have Rolls-Royce engines on there, so they might choose that because they have more experience or have maintenance facilities involved with that. Sometimes it comes down to cost. At the given time that, let's say early on in the process of delivery, maybe the majority of them are outfitted with Pratt & Whitney engines, but then another better engine comes along. So as the aircraft becomes better, or as there are more developments, you might have other engines put on. But there's really a whole host of reasons why an airline might choose, everything from economics to what they already support, what they have experience with, probably some national issues too. You might choose an engine if you're from a given country that your nation has some involvement in developing. But it's hard to say how many suppliers for these aircraft there are, but really it's incredible how many suppliers go into these aircraft, everything from tails to plastics to what have you. It's across the board. So the assembly and the manufacturing, obviously the certification, most of that, the engine certification is done by the engine manufacturers, but the overall certification at the end of the day will be done by Boeing. But there will be parts coming in from everywhere, essentially.
Now, when this incident happened, and you listened to some of the radio conversation between the pilot and the tower in Denver, the pilot said we need some more time to do some more checkings. That means, are they looking in the manual? Are these the type of manuals you guys produce? How's your company fit into this entire cooperation?
Oh, I mean, the manuals, the checklists, really from an operational perspective, a lot of that is dictated somewhat by the manufacturers, by the training organizations, but also mainly by the operators. The kinds of manuals that we produce are really helping with more airspace. So an understanding of the airspace over the Atlantic or over the Pacific, procedures when you're in that airspace, and less about these kind of checklist emergency procedures. We do have, where we would have touched this sort of or operation would be the emergency response plan. We help operators develop what you call an emergency response plan. So how do you speak to the press? How do you speak with the authorities? How do you, if there, God forbid, are incidents that happen to the passengers, that how do you notify next of kin, that sort of thing. But more importantly, I think what this incident shows is really aviation is moving in the direction of really implementing across the board, and the airlines already have it. It's mandatory. It's what's called one of the software products that we provide is called safety management system. So really, aviation for many decades was a slightly more reactive organization. So you would wait till an incident happened, you would analyze the incident, and then you would change things according to what you would learn from that incident. What safety management system really does, and I think this is a perfect example of how well it can work, is it gets ahead of the problem. So it's trying to introduce predictability and proactiveness into an operation. So you're constantly identifying, constantly recognizing potential risk factors in your daily operation. And if the risk factors go above a certain level, you then analyze how you're doing that and change your behavior before it might lead to an accident or incident. So really SMS, what they did is, risk analysis, risk management, risk assessment, all that sort of thing is what they would have done in this particular instance with the engines across the board. And that's why these aircraft were taken out of operation. The one thing that, of course, SMS or nothing is you can't completely get rid of risk. Risk is really in everything we do. And it's funny, I saw a quote on COVID, and it was amazing the parallels that the industry, aviation, and what discovery on COVID now has gone through is, again, is this: yes, we can risk mitigate, we can risk assess, we can risk analyze, but we can't risk eliminate. It's virtually impossible. So SMS helped make the decisions on taking these aircraft out of the fleet. They will dictate and help decide what next steps are. We will learn from that process. We'll become more proactive, and the next time we operate with an aircraft, we probably will have gained some insights or experience, and we'll act accordingly. So,
interestingly enough, two of the principles that you spoke about are key principles in the world of tourism security. One, which is that there's no person, item, or reputation that cannot be harmed or destroyed. In other words, risk is ubiquitous; it's always there.
Sure.
And secondly, that perceptions may be wrong, but the consequences of those perceptions are always correct.
Be very real, correct.
Yeah, so those are two things which I think are touching the airline industry, just like they're touching every form of tourism security. So I was glad to hear you say that. The thing I think I would like you to repeat, just because you said it very quickly, but I think it'll be important for people to hear. If that plane had totally lost that one engine and had to keep flying and it was over the Pacific someplace, it could have made it to Hawaii. Am I
Oh,
correct?
absolutely. Absolutely. That's really the shift from 4-engine aircraft to 2-engine over water operations was due to the fact that we started to see the reliability improvements on these engines. I mean, this engine failing, happened after millions of hours of operation. So not this specific engine, but this type of engine.
Yes.
So they're incredibly reliable. So the risk of both engines failing on one aircraft are really a statistical anomaly. So you have something, like I said, called ETOPS. So it's extended over water operation. And there's some procedures. You go to a slightly lower altitude, but no, it could very comfortably continue to fly on one engine.
Well, that's
Now,
good to know, because a lot of those planes go across the Atlantic to Europe, or across the Pacific to Australia. And I don't think anybody wants to get on a plane that you're going to have to swim.
Now the routes, they do adjust the routes accordingly. So if you're going on really long extended, they will force you in a twin engine aircraft to fly a slightly different route. So you're always within a certain distance from land.
Right.
But yes, no, they're definitely designed for extended over water operations.
yeah, and unfortunately, what many people don't realize, Hawaii, where I'm at, we're probably one of the most remote places on Earth.
Yes.
There are no islands between here and California, so you cannot do anything. You're over the water. You're over the water. And one of the concerns we reported about a few years ago, and I don't know if anything has changed, is when the 737, this was even before the MAX incident, had sometimes issues. And I experienced it myself a number of times. When you take off from Los Angeles going to Honolulu on the 737, all of a sudden the pilot turns around after 30 minutes in the flight and lands in San Francisco to get more fuel. So there seems to be, at least at that time, a risk to not to take off to a flight to Honolulu and run out of fuel. Do you know anything about this? Is this?
Oh no, I don't. But fuel reserves are very strictly monitored as well. So there are requirements that you need to know, that you need to have, and some of that may be based on, let's say you have weather over one of the islands in Hawaii versus another island. So it could really come down to the fact that weather has changed, not necessarily en route, but actually at destination. So it would need to onboard some extra fuel in case it needs to actually divert to a different island. I mean, that could be part of it. It could be the winds have changed. But really all of that's calculated, very closely. It could be it was kept on the ground too long. I mean, there's so many variables that really could come into play in an instance like that. But certainly you'll want to take off with as much fuel as possible. It's just good insurance is really what it is. So that's you get into, in case you get into a holding pattern over Hawaii at some point, and so that's probably just a precaution. So.
And on this particular flight from Denver to Honolulu, how did the flight manage to land within, I think, 30 minutes after takeoff? And I really have no idea how exactly this works, but you always hear about you have to lose some fuel because you're operating, you're too heavy to land.
I don't know. I don't believe it did have to do any fuel dumping, so I assume it was carrying not necessarily more fuel than it needed. The reason you need to fuel dump a lot of times on the longer flights is because the landing weight limitations on an aircraft are often lower than the takeoff weight limitations. And that's just because of the impact on the tires, on the landing gear, on the aircraft. So you don't want to stress the aircraft out unnecessarily. But yes, you're right. In this particular instance, I don't believe it probably just wasn't carrying fuel or passenger load beyond the limits of what it needed to land. So it seems to me like it was a very straightforward go around. I mean, they had the engine incidents and they just came back around, and air traffic control will be clearing out the airspace, so they don't need to do any kind of maneuvering or holding or waiting, and the aircraft comes back in for a landing. So
yeah, I think one of the things we might emphasize is you're really saying that this is not a one every flight is the same. It's really an equation, which is
Correct.
taking into account um, the altitude, it's taking into account the baggage, taking into account the weight load, it's taking into account probably temperature. So I
Right.
know that it's a little harder to take off or land in very hot temperatures than it is in maybe colder temperatures. Uh, Certainly wind conditions, anybody who's gone over the equator knows that when you kind of go over the equator, the winds are going in two different directions and the plane, you always know where the equator is. You don't have to look. You feel it. So I guess what you're really saying is this is a very carefully designed mathematical formula, which takes into account multiple variables. It's not a univariable statistical equation. It's a multivariable equation.
I mean, you know, Denver has an entirely unique variable too, is that it's a mile-high airport. So
Right.
there's thinner, and so so even in that regard, certainly, you know, it is a, and this is where these policies, procedures, and processes in aviation really come to play. These things are in oftentimes very clearly prescribed. The beautiful thing about aviation is it's incredibly transparent in sharing best practices. So if you know, if Japan Airlines has come up with some fabulous process, policy, or procedure, very quickly aviation, if it's a great idea, aviation could pick up on it, and you might see a lot of airlines worldwide adopting these new policies and procedures. It's a very transparent, very a lot of camaraderie, and a lot of sharing of best practices and ideas, along with, of course, the policies, procedures, the regulatory authorities, the manufacturers, the training organizations impose.
So for your company, your clients, are these airlines or are these regulated authorities like the FAA? Who do you cater to?
Really, a little bit of everything. The large airlines often have kind of what we do in-house. So they might have their own organization that handles manuals, et cetera. So we really cater to the organizations that still require this, or even if they don't necessarily require it, they want to operate to the level of an airline. So it'll be regional airlines, small airlines, commercial business aviation operators. We have commercial drone operators that we support. But we also support what you call fixed base operations, which is kind of the terminal operations for private aviation, the delivery of fuel, that kind of stuff. So it's really, just imagine any organization that just doesn't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal to stay on top of the regulatory standards. You know, it's an intensive regulatory environment. On the flip side, of course, we do work very closely together with the authorities, because some of the manuals that we deliver need to be approved and authorized by the authorities. So we have regular contact with FAA, EASA, and authorities worldwide as we work to improve the way we do things, how we submit it to them, and we work hand in hand with them on these approval processes. So
interesting times, interesting business. Is COVID any type of, does this reflect manuals or anything these days?
It's yeah, sure. I mean, enhanced procedures have been introduced into manuals that weren't there beforehand. We found a lot of people that had some of these operators that were actually flying less actually took the time to become more professional. So funny enough, they weren't just sitting back and taking time off. They actually took the time to analyze how they were doing things and called up, you know, us to help them improve, implement safety management system software. And what you had was, you know, SMS software being used not necessarily for flight operations, but for other analyses within their operation, change management, et cetera, so that they could actually come out of this when they started flying again and have made improvements to the way they operate before they really start operating. So, so yes, you know, specific emergency response plans, policies and procedures, communication processes have changed due to COVID. But we were really happy to see that a lot of operators, rather than just sitting idly by while they were flying less, actually took the time to do a lot of self-improvement and a lot of self-analysis. So
That's good to hear. Again, I think you know, the airline industry, when it comes to safety, I think has done a really good job on the whole. The fact that one incident becomes a major
Sure.
event tells us that most days nothing happens, which is in tourism security, your goal is to have nothing happen. So you work hard so it looks boring. So they can do a little bit better on the food, but the safety's okay.
That's true.
Right. And that's not part of the manual, I guess.
No, it's not, but it'd be nice if you could add a menu along with the manual.
No, this was an interesting session, Mark. And if anyone wants to learn more about your company, I'm sure you have a website. We could.
We do, and it's very, very easy. It's aviationmanuals with an s.com. So very easy to find us, and love to speak to anyone or help anyone out that ever has questions. So
Thank you. I'll look forward to seeing you in Maryland the next time I can get there.
please look me up, and thanks for your time, Peter and Jürgen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
aloha from this part of the world, and thank you, Mark. And we'll be in touch soon. And yeah, and as I said, you might want to look at WTN.travel, World Tourism Network, and join our aviation discussion group. I think VJ would welcome this. And any of you who are watching us live, feel free to go back to livestream.travel, and you find an archive of this session very soon. And of course, if anyone is interested or has any interesting comments for the session, feel free to go and click on contact on any of our websites, and we'll be happy to also share it with Mark. Well, from my end, I can only say aloha and good night or good morning, depending where you are, and hopefully talk to you soon.
And from our end, it's y'all come back soon.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again. Thanks.
Beaches is all about families, and keeping your family safe is our #1 priority. That's why we created our Platinum Protocol of Cleanliness, setting a new standard of excellence in health and safety protocols to give you a worry-free destination wedding of a lifetime. Beaches was built on connection. Connecting with family and friends, celebrating old times, and creating new beginnings. And we know the love you have for your family and having them there for the most special time of your life is what's most important. At Beaches, you can still have that happily ever after with a fully customized destination wedding surrounded by the people who mean the most to you. You can feel safe saying "I do" in a lush tropical garden, or walking down a white sand aisle with a calm blue sea as your backdrop. Our wedding venues are found in wide open spaces, nature-made for celebrating your love. And while we've always led the industry in health and safety protocols, our resorts are even safer now than ever, giving you a wedding free of worries, surrounded by love. That's why we've reduced the capacity of our venues and put more physical distance between guests. Instead of tables for 8 at your reception, we'll seat only 6 guests per table. We've eliminated buffets and specialty food stations, so all food will be plated and served by Beaches staff wearing masks. We're even offering live stream service of your wedding ceremony, so your friends and family who can't travel right now can still share in your special day. Once the vows have been exchanged, the honeymoon of a lifetime begins. And we're taking every measure necessary to ensure your health and safety during your stay at Beaches. As part of the Sandals Resorts family, we've followed in their footsteps in setting a new standard of excellence with our Platinum Protocol of Cleanliness. Together with the extensive research from local ministries and health officials, the Center for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization, Beaches has instituted advanced hygiene practices across 18 key touchpoints. A triple check system that includes inspecting, cleaning, and sanitizing hard surfaces and common areas every 20 minutes. Adding auto-dispensing hand sanitizing stations throughout the resort. To ensure the utmost safety, Beaches will be using hospital-grade disinfectants, electrostatic sprayers for advanced cleaning, UV lighting equipment to inspect cleanliness, and air duct sanitization for each room before every guest's arrival. We've gone so far as to steam clean and sanitize carpeting and flooring prior to arrivals, and placing personal hand sanitizers in every guest room. For added safety, all staff members are required to wear protective face gear at all times. And from now on, guests can check in online at home, so they can bypass the front desk and go directly to their rooms. Stricter physical distancing protocols have also been put in place in every part of the resort. Chlorine and pH levels at all our pools and water parks are monitored every 2 hours. And we've taken added measures to protect the health and safety of your family. Our kids' camps facilities are sanitized before and after each use. And all of our professional nannies carry pocket-sized bottles of hand sanitizer. Our tween and teen hangouts, including the Xbox Play Lounge and Trench Town, are sanitized before and after each use with hospital-grade disinfectants. In addition, all our spa facilities and sports equipment will be sanitized before and after use to protect the health and safety of our guests and their families. Both Sandals and Beaches are committed to providing strict compliance and implementation of these safety protocols. So much so that we've created a dedicated quality inspection team at each resort to make sure all safety measures are adhered to. We can't wait to help you make your dreams come true with a destination wedding at Beaches. And while you're focused on your new life together, surrounded by those you love the most, we'll take care of everything else.